Yes, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. The Ukraine Accountability Conference will soon be drawing to a close. Before it does, we will hear from Ukrainian President Zelensky, and we will be reflecting on everything that he says. Before we do that, though, I have some guests who are joining me here at the table to reflect on the day's conference so far. First of all, we have the Senior Advisor to ICC Prosecutor Karim, Thomas Lynch, the UAC Project Lead Anita Conijn from the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Welcome. And EU Director-General for Justice, Anna Gallego. Thank you for joining me. Before we start, though, I'd like to share a short clip.
Ніяк не можу повернути маму, але хоча б відновити справедливість, знайти тих, хто це зробив. Для мене це важливо. Я розумію, що треба показати світу, що тут відбувалося.
Yeah, an appeal, a desperate appeal, heartbreaking appeal to restore justice. Anita, we've had a full day of talking here and promises to coordinate with local NGOs, to streamline work streams. But what difference is all of that really going to make to someone like that young woman who's lost her mother?
Yeah. I understand the question because it begs, the situation begs those questions. And I think it's going to make a lot of difference because, of course, you can say, well, it's a lot of talk today, but it's a first step and it's a very important step because in the end, we all want to have accountability, as we call it, for those victims or like her mom. And as she was saying, we need to show the world what happened here. So it needs to start with the setup and the framework, and then we can take action.
Yeah.
So I think it will make a lot of difference. And the other point is perhaps it's also a sign that the world is not looking away, that those victims, that they are heard, and that's very important as well, I think.
Yeah. But I mean, there were a few references, at least in the opening, to the need to realize that we're going to have to wait maybe decades for this stuff, for the systems that we're talking about changing, for the coordination to become as effective as we need it to be. Is the message then to local Ukrainians that they're going to have to wait 10 years to find justice?
No, of course not. But I think the steps we set today set in place a better working system, and that can take off as we speak. There already have been actions taken, and the conference is helping it being more effective. But it's not the case that they need to wait. It can start. It has started already.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the working system. Let me turn to you, Thomas. There's been talk about what's being crafted here is a model that can be rolled out more broadly. But how realistic is that, or how accurate is that, considering the very European-centric nature of this conference?
Well, I think it's very realistic, and frankly, I think it's what needs to be done. And I think there's a genuine commitment, and we heard in the conference earlier today that these aren't we're not fighting for European values. We're fighting for the values of humanity, and I think it's very important. And that's why a conference like this is so valuable, because it brings the spotlight, yes, to the situation in Ukraine, but every situation, as tragic as it can be, provides an opportunity, and this sort of renewed commitment to accountability and to the law is something that can and I think will be built upon, not only to address what's happening now in Ukraine, but then beyond that to look how it can be used in other situations. And we've seen this throughout history. First you had Nuremberg. Without Nuremberg you would not have had the Yugoslav tribunals. Without the Yugoslav tribunal you wouldn't have had Rwanda, and so on, Cambodia, Sierra Leone, and then ultimately the ICC. So I think with the tragedy of what we're seeing now, I think does present an opportunity to strengthen the rules-based system, strengthen accountability, and then use that across different situations, both now and in the future.
Yeah, but you can appreciate how jarring it must be for, at home, Syrians watching, citizens of Central African Republic, Afghanistan, thinking that this impetus, this new impetus, the many examples of innovation that we've heard, they're happening now, and how can they really, are they really going to be rolled out to encompass other conflicts?
Well, I think the way the media handles a situation like Ukraine right now, it does shine a spotlight and it brings a lot of world attention. But I don't think it doesn't mean that in these situations you referenced, a lot of work is not already going on. Working right now in the Office of the Prosecutor, Ukraine is one of 12 situations right now that we're currently investigating. And we've been quite clear that, this does not get any special treatment compared to Afghanistan, Central African Republic, Mali, other situations. It might get more in the media. It might be more talked about in different circles, but in the reality of the work that we're doing, we apply our resources equally across the board.
Okay. Anna, in terms of goals of this conference, is it just wishful thinking to think that the conference can also act as a deterrent to other potential perpetrators on the ground? Is that how these things work in practice?
Well, first of all, the main goal of this conference is to be a first step on accountability efforts. So, and accountability efforts of crimes that have already been committed, and to bring healing to victims, and primarily also to send a strong message to the Ukrainian people that we stand united with them. If that means also some kind of deterrence effect, that is the whole point of criminal law. Of course, it doesn't always work, unfortunately, but at the same time, if you don't start, you will never know. And we have to put the first steps, the first bricks on this wall for accountability in order to bring justice to victims, and hopefully to act also as deterrent. But that is not for us to judge right now.
I have to wonder how effective a deterrent it can be, because you referenced the Yugoslavia tribunals, Nuremberg even a few more decades ago, and still these things are happening. Again, Thomas, do you think it's realistic? Is this what Ukrainians are kind of envisioning? A kind of Nuremberg trial setting? Are we over-promising? Is that realistic to have something like that?
Well, I think you can't overpromise on effort and commitment, and I think that's reflected in a lot of the comments we've heard today in the conference, and I think that's there. Now, of course, the first job is to conduct the investigations and to build cases, and that's where the focus is right now, to prepare for hopefully a successful prosecution. There are challenges, of course, in every step of the way, both in the investigations but then in the prosecutions. But in terms of overpromising, I think, like I mentioned, I don't think you can overpromise the effort, and that's what's within our control. Other factors in terms of, can you actually get custody to somebody who you've indicted, or where there's an arrest warrant? Those are more complicated factors. But I think what's being shown today is the commitment.
Yeah. And, our focus is, of course, on prosecutions, on criminal justice. Earlier in our session this morning, we were also talking about other forms of restorative justice. For instance, truth and reconciliation approaches. Victims or survivors, I should say, just want to get their story heard. Are those conversations happening? Is that kind of shift to an approach like that? Is that an option in this case?
I really don't. I don't know really.
Yeah.
I mean, the focus today is more on the legal side, as Thomas just explained as well. But of course, there are alternatives also possible.
Yeah.
It's just not the focus of the conference
Today.
today.
Yeah. And at the ICC, your focus is what it is, prosecution. Do you hear conversations about other approaches? Because part of the goal of this conference is to make it survivor-centered, and if criminal justice is going to take that much longer, perhaps we should explore other alternatives.
And I think these other alternatives are being discussed. And I think, and again, it's not just in relation to Ukraine. I think we've seen it across all situations that you referenced. There's a variety of different ways of tackling the issue of accountability and justice and reconciliation, whether it's international, whether it's criminal tribunals, criminal prosecutions, whether it's truth and reconciliation efforts, reparations. I think ultimately you have to address them all. And I don't think there is even a set sequence on which to go first, but they all have to be part of the overall package of effort that we put together. And I know that as Anita mentioned, we right now this conference is focused on accountability, specifically criminal accountability, but I'm sure in other settings you'll see similar conferences talking about different truth and reconciliation commissions or reparations or other angles to the overall package of support we can provide.
Yeah, okay. I should say a short message to our viewers at home. There's a slight delay in the speech of President Zelensky, so we have a little bit more time here, but we'll be going to that live shortly. Let's talk a little bit about your experiences in Ukraine, because we mentioned this before, but you've been on the ground. You haven't yet, Anita, right? But what was your trip like, Thomas?
We've been 3 times now. First in late March to Lviv, and then subsequently two different trips to Kiev. And I think each one has been different depending on the situation. I think the most profound takeaway I have is when you actually see, with your own eyes or hear with your own ears the stories that many of us around the world are watching on TV. And I think it has a different feel to it when you talk to the survivors, or you see people sitting outside, their destroyed apartment buildings, or even more so when their first trip to Lviv, we crossed the Polish border and you see a stream, hundreds and thousands of families, mostly women and children, crossing, and you see the young children, 4 or 5 years old, with a backpack, and they're going into such uncertainty, and they might not have any place to go back to, and I think that kind of brings it home as to why we're doing this and why we're having this conference. It's about those people who are either fleeing the country or have lost loved ones, and what we owe them and what effort we can provide. So I think, to me, there's a lot of takeaways you can get from watching the news, but when you're on the ground and you're seeing it and you're talking to these people, it takes it to a different level.
I can imagine. And in terms of what we owe them or what we can do for them, Anna, in the context of your work at the Justice Department, how do you kind of create this survivor-centered approach?
Well, first of all, I would like to build on also what Anita was saying before. First, step to reconciliation and is accountability. You can't have peace without accountability. So that is first of all the primary objective. And from the European Union, I have to stress, as Commissioner Reynders also said this morning, that this is the first conversation that we are having.
Sure.
And from the first moment in the Commission, we, of course, approach this from a policy angle, because we are not responsible for prosecutions, of course. So all we can do, and we have done it from minute one, and in a very agile and effective way, is to coordinate efforts from all stakeholders, both in terms of accountability, providing support, for example, to Eurojust in order to for them to.
Can you give me some concrete examples of the sort of?
Yes, of course. Eurojust being, just for information, the agency of the European Union for international judicial cooperation in criminal matters, which is based in The Hague. You had the liaison prosecutor of Ukraine this morning as well. They cooperate and exchange information for cross-border crime. Well, in the space of 1 month, the last 1st of June, enter into force an extended mandate for Eurojust for them to allow to collect, store, and also process evidence for war crimes, which was not possible before this with the existing mandate. So we reacted very quickly in order for Eurojust to be able to do this and to provide support to Ukrainian authorities.
How long does that decision take because it sounds like something that should just be, yeah, of course you should extend the mandate to do that, given that you're in a war zone.
Exactly, and
But is this something that takes months to prepare, or is this weeks? Is this days?
Well, I'll give you an example. I mean, an ordinary, let's say, legislative proposal takes months and sometimes years. And this concrete proposal was approved and entered into force in 1 month.
In 1 month.
Because the stakeholders were all united and going in the same direction to speed up the process, the interinstitutional process.
So is that the biggest hurdle then, is to get all the stakeholders on board for to agree policies that make sense?
Well, those are normally interinstitutional negotiations, and each case is different. But what I want to highlight is precisely that in this case, the response has been unanimously united and really strong to send the message and to get ready for the Ukrainian authorities, who have to be in the driving seat of their own process for peace, to be able to do that, and to support them with that. We also have an internal task force to provide for the needs that they communicate us, and coordinate the efforts of member states and of internal services. And now this conference has taken coordination to the next level, to coordinate also with international partners and to bring everybody together to provide support to Ukrainian authorities, which, I repeat, have to be on the lead.
Yeah. Yeah, they have to take the lead indeed. And Anita, from your perspective, what are the biggest hurdles towards achieving the sort of coordination and cohesive action that we've talked about?
Well, you know, the response to the situation in Ukraine has been overwhelming.
Yeah.
There have been lots of initiatives, resolutions. So everybody, all countries that joined this action wanted to do something, and including the Netherlands, of course. So that what you do then is you try to see what is it that we can do, how can we best help. And what we found after a while is that, yes, we had ideas, perhaps help with forensic evidence. Our military police, they were going on a mission. And then you realize, there are also other countries who want to do this, but then it would be a good idea if they all have the same kind of, if they all do the same kind of thing in the same kind of way. So for us, the reason for starting this conference was really that we thought, there is a real need for more cooperation, because everybody wants to do something, and there are lots of resources and goodwill, but how can we best channel this?
But this was an exceptional situation. Oh, I'm just hearing that we are able now to go to President Zelensky, so we'll continue our conversation shortly. Over to Zelensky.
Make contact with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and I feel honored and privileged that he is with us today. I see he's now on the screen. Mr. President, it is very good to see you again after our previous encounter in Kiev. Thank you very much for being with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear participants of the conference. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to address you and participate in this conference, the goal of which is to rescue the international law, because it is now on your efforts and our efforts will defend whether the international law will exist, whether the humanity will live in chaos and being pressured by people who think that power decides everything, and the tyrants can do anything protecting themselves by alleged international law. It soon will be the next monthly anniversary of the anniversary of the destruction of MH17. At that time, in the Ukrainian sky, Russian criminals killed 298 people. Having seen this crime, the world understood what is happening in Ukraine, understood the level of aggression that Russia has come to Ukraine with. The destruction of MH17 drew international attention. Mass media and statesmen understood the pain of the people who lost their relatives in that catastrophe. The children died, 3 toddlers, and it's impossible to forget the pictures of the toys that were found among the rebels. The time is passing by. There's less and less that we hear about that tragedy, but the justice does its work in the Netherlands, and our experts and international experts managed to put together the full picture of what happened to MH17, and I have no doubt that everyone who have perpetrated that crime will be punished. But we have to remember why that crime became possible. We have to remember that this is not the only crime and not an accidental crime. That catastrophe was one of the many catastrophes and tragedies that were caused by the primary Russian crime, which is the armed aggression against Ukraine. It started in 2014 and still persists. Until today, it takes away the lives of our people. Today in the morning, Russian missiles hit our city of Vinnytsia, an ordinary peaceful city. Cruise missiles hit 2 community facilities. Houses were destroyed, the medical center was destroyed, the cars and trams were on fire. This is the act of Russian terror. These are not people. These are bastards who have done it. So 2 cruise missiles hit the downtown. 20 people died as of now, and 3 children, the huge number of wounded. I would like you to commemorate these people with a minute of silence. All those people who were killed since 2014 until today, all those who were murdered by Russia on our Ukrainian soil and in our Ukrainian sky.
Я дуже вам дякую.
Thank you.
Я вдячний вам всім за те, що
I'm grateful to all of you
разом зі
for
мною зараз
being
вшанували пам'ять жертв російської агресії.
together here and for commemorating the victims of the Russian aggression.
Бо кожного дня
We're doing this every day.
люди
Every single day, our people are dying.
через російську
Every single day, children are dying. Dozens of thousands of Ukrainian citizens were killed, murdered, or handicapped. Millions of them have lost their homes, and still we're trying to identify how many children were kidnapped by Russian forces and taken away to Russia. The preliminary figure is horrendous, 200,000 children. The world is seeing what happened in Mariupol and Bucha, Russian missiles and terror. Live on TV, you can see the Russian artillery destroying the cities in Donbass and destroying civil infrastructure in Kharkiv and in the south of our country. Since the beginning of the full-fledged occupation on the 4th of February, law enforcement registered 34,039 crimes related to Russian aggression. This is less than in 5 months. You can imagine how many crimes have been committed since 2014. And for this primary crime of armed aggression. Everyone who is responsible for this in Russia has to be punished. The Ukrainian justice will do its part according to the Ukrainian jurisdiction. I do believe that International Criminal Court will inevitably bring justice in the crimes that are under your jurisdiction. The military crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide. And I'm grateful to all our partners who are supporting us on this path. By the way, to help the investigation, Ukrainian and international, we've launched the project, the Matters of Ukrainian People book. This is an online platform that collects the evidence of war crimes and information about the perpetrators. Such digital and communication instruments in the modern world speed up the work of the investigation, but for different reasons, our institutions cannot bring to the accountability all the perpetrators for the primary crimes. This is why we need a special tribunal on the issues of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, the tribunal that will bring justice and punishment to those who started this catastrophe and tragedy, which became the biggest war in Europe since World War II. Our efforts will suffice to collect the evidence and to draw the picture of this crime and to make sure that this evidence would be could be heard in the courts. But the people whose decisions led to this massive amount of crimes cannot hide behind the immunity of the civil servants and officials. The principle of inevitability of punishment should apply to them as well. And this can be done only by the special court of aggression against Ukraine. But also we need the instrument of compensation of all the losses and damages. The time is playing on Russia's side because people don't want to wait for justice for too long. If justice is not coming, people start feeling that as if it's not there at all. And nowadays, the Russian crimes are not even remembered. Those crimes that were committed back in the beginning in 2014 and 2015. The feeling about the Mariupol, the horrible Mariupol, the Azovstal, the Bucha is pursued by, well, in a totally different manner, with less intensivity. Of course, the judgment of people have not changed, but in order to ensure the feeling that the justice is restored, we should not only punish the perpetrators, the victims should be provided with all needed assistance and to restore all the damages that were made by this aggression. The aggression should lose on the battlefield and on the field of senses and meanings. It has to be a damage to the aggressor in the first place. Please pay attention that behind all the hundreds of thousands of crimes, there's only one group of people standing behind it, those who are giving criminal orders, those who are lying in the same manner, those who are thinking the ninth year now how to make pain to others, how to make sure that there are more losses to other countries and nations. So legal and physical entities are providing for the well-being of those who give orders. They openly own assets and money, or hidden assets and hidden money that they have channeled to other jurisdictions, to the states and quasi-states. This is why Ukraine came up with a proposal to create a special compensation mechanism. We think that compensation of the damages perpetrated by Russian aggression can come from Russian assets and money hosted abroad in other jurisdictions. And we have to understand that the post-war rebuilding of Ukraine is an extremely comprehensive and difficult project, which can become a success with the assistance of the partners. And the sooner the compensation mechanism will trigger, the faster the money of the terrorist state will be transferred into compensation, and the less of a burden this will be for our partners. I would like to thank Canada and other countries who are working to make sure that their legislation would allow for such compensation process to happen. This has to go global to make sure that no one in the world would ever think that the aggression against the sovereign state, against the international law, can be bearable for the aggressor. We need such a legal global pathway that would reflect one of our common values, the rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, justice should always make its course, and the task of ours and all the statesmen is to provide all the necessary instruments for the justice to happen. The strength of rule of law is ensured only when there are efficient, sustainable institutions that are capable of implementing this justice under any conditions. We know what kind of institutions we need. We can establish them, and they will do their work. And this will be such a big contribution to the protection of international law, the international order, which can be compared maybe only to the Nuremberg Tribunal. This is our common cause. I would like to thank you for your assistance, for your attention. Slava Ukraini.
Mr. President, thank you very much. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone here in the room when I say that we admire your tenacity. We admire your perseverance, your moral leadership, and also your courage, and also that of all of the Ukrainian people. And thank you very much for that. We will continue to support you. We will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine on each and every angle of this terrible war, but certainly also on the angle of accountability. Justice must and will be done. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for being with us here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you very much for being with us here today. This concludes, and also I think the excellent remarks of President Zelensky conclude the Ukrainian Accountability Conference, and once again point out the absolute necessity of seeing this through and a long-term commitment. Because that was one of the things we started the conference with. This will not be easy. It will take a lot of time, and it will take a lot of perseverance. And thank you very much for helping out in achieving that. I do think we have all the tools to achieve accountability, and we also have a clear commitment to join forces, continue the dialogue, and to ensure that as a group of nations, we are as effective as possible now and in the future. Following this conference, as you know, a political declaration will be published with the support of 45 countries. I would like to thank once again the ICC and the European Commission, and also the co-hosts Canada, Denmark, the UK and the US for co-sponsoring this event. And finally, a very big and sincere thank you once again to all of you for participating today and for contributing to this tremendously important topic. Thank you very much, and I would now like to invite you to join our group photo. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll leave the ministers to have their group photo. We'll continue here. We've picked out a few clips from Zelensky's speech, which we're going to share shortly. But first of all, it's a lot of what we've come to expect from President Zelensky, talking with a lot of passion, a lot of eloquence, making appeals. But what was your take, Anita?
What struck me was that he made a reference to the MH17 process, because in the Netherlands, of course, there's a lot of work has been done to bring accountability for that crime. And what he said, he was making it, he was comparing it, saying, you know, in Ukraine today, this happens every day. He mentioned this village, children, same thing as in the MH17. Children die, it happens every day, and help us bring accountability to those situations as well. I thought it was very strong.
Yeah.
that comparison. And the other thing that struck me was that he was also making it larger, saying, you know, this is a situation that must stop, and it's in this case, it should stop in other cases as well. So he too was comparing Ukraine also to other situations that are comparable around the world, just as we try to do within the conference.
In the context of the MH17, of course, there's still no resolution when it comes to fighting or getting justice for the perpetrators, or for the victims' families, rather. And in general, is there anything that this conference is doing that will stop Russia just kind of shrugging its shoulders? What do you think, Thomas?
Well, ultimately, I think the pursuit of accountability, as was mentioned earlier, is the deterrent value of accountability efforts. It cannot be underestimated. However, you know, that deterrent effect may take time. It may not be apparent right away, but the urgency of effort that we can put towards accountability for crimes we're seeing right now in Ukraine, I think it does have an effect, and I think over time you see that. You know, whether cases start small, like we've seen some of the cases already happening in Ukraine, whether they go higher up the chain of command. Ultimately, you know, those who are committing these crimes, you know, have to understand that there will be consequences for their actions. And if we can demonstrate that, you know, even if it's over a continuum, even if it's not like within 2 months or 4 months or 6 months, but if we can start showing incremental progress towards that goal, it will have an impact, and that's what criminal law does in general. So I think that's, you know, and kind of the urgency to tackle that right now, which you've seen, you know, reflected in comments at the conference today, is something that we have to kind of seize upon and keep that momentum.
Yeah. I suppose you brought up Nuremberg earlier. I can't imagine people in 1942, let's say, could ever have imagined that there would be, you know, very senior members of the leadership standing trial just 3 years later. So, yeah, we can be hopeful. Anna, in terms of the commitment that President Zelensky is calling for, and that Minister Hoekstra is also encouraging, from a kind of organizational point of view, what support would you need in order to be able to achieve the goals of coordination and evidence collection and putting survivors at the center?
Well, I think coordination in itself is key to grant the support.
And in practice, that means what?
In practice, that means that we have created the spaces in order for the stakeholders to get together and exchange views, anticipate the needs, receive the requests from the Ukrainian authorities on needs on the ground, and we coordinate the process with stakeholders in order to provide.
So where's the bottleneck? Can you put names to this? Who needs to be better? Who needs to be providing information better? Who needs to be speaking to who? Who is not currently speaking?
Well, I would say that all the structures are in place. I mean, results, as Thomas was saying, also results may take time, but in this particular situation, we've managed to put together almost from the start the structures to create these coordination efforts and to really bring together the stakeholders in order to provide results for the Ukrainian authorities. As I was mentioning before, Eurojust mandate has been extended to allow for the collection of evidence. IT systems are being put in place. IT systems, digital database, so that this evidence, which is basically digital, can be stored securely. And it's very important to put the first steps now of the accountability in the future, because evidence has to be collected right now. It has to be collected in a way that it is admissible in court when the time comes, and it will. But we have to put the foundations of that right now, and to ensure that evidence is gathered in an admissible way with high standards in procedural law. Okay. And secondly, this evidence has to be collected in a way that is respectful for victims. And for that, Eurojust and the ICC, together with the Genocide Network, have come up with guidelines for civil society organizations, for investigators to gather this evidence in a respectful way, gender-sensitive, child-sensitive, and to avoid duplications and repetitive testimonies so that it doesn't bring additional suffering to the victim. So all these efforts are being deployed right now. Of course, this is not a one-day effort. This will take time, and we have to prepare for that because we don't know really how long it will take.
Okay, all right, let's, thank you very much for that. Let's go to a quote that we pulled from Zelensky's speech that I'd like us to reflect on.
Кожного дня гинуть діти. Через російську агресію десятки тисяч українців убиті, закатовані, скалічені.
Of Ukrainian citizens were killed, murdered, or handicapped. Millions of them have lost their homes, and still we're trying to identify how many children were kidnapped by Russian forces and taken away to Russia. The preliminary figure is horrendous, 200,000 children. The world is seeing what happened.
Yeah, it's very painful, especially when you hear those figures. Is the reality not though right now? I mean, Ukraine is in the midst of it all. Aren't they more focused just on surviving rather than a search for justice? What do you think?
Well,
are we pushing them too hard to? I don't know.
I don't think those. It doesn't have to be either or. Of course, there will be many who are just focused on surviving and are not thinking of getting justice right now because they just have to continue in order to make it, to continue their lives. But there are others who are ready to take those steps. And what we need to do is to make sure that the structures are there for them to gather the evidence, to give testimony, that everything is there when they are ready.
Yeah.
And if we wait a long time until everybody's ready, a lot will be lost in the meantime.
Is there anything we can do to prevent, or maybe some examples even, what are the things that Russia can be doing to kind of frustrate the goals of this conference, and how do we overcome them?
Well, I don't know what Russia should be doing or should not be doing. I don't think that is relevant, really.
Yeah. So we just go ahead.
We just go ahead.
Yeah. Is there any? Do you pay heed at all? Does the ICC pay heed at all to the things that Russia could be doing to frustrate the goals of this conference? Or,
well, I think from the perspective of the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC, I think we've reached out to the Russian Federation on multiple occasions and asked them to engage. And we said, not just within the context of Ukraine, but in the context of all situations, we need to speak to all parties. If they have, information they want to, share with us, we'll receive it. We'll subject to scrutiny like we subject, information from all sides. So our position is one of engagement. It's important to engage all sides. Now, we haven't received a response, but we'll keep
You're
trying.
not expecting one either?
Well, we're hopeful that we will get one at some point, because I think that's, that's what you need. We need to demonstrate that, we are, looking at all sides. We treat all sides in the same manner. This is not one-sided. This is a legal process, and it's important that how we deal with Ukraine is also how we deal with the Russian Federation. And we've done that, and perhaps over time their position will change. As of now, we've not heard back, but we'll try to engage.
Yeah, because I think it was Commissioner Reynders, or perhaps it was Chief Prosecutor Khan, who talked about there's an active war zone and there are ICC teams in active areas where there are firefights still going. So it would be great to have the support of the Russian Federation in that. But I don't know how realistic that is. Okay, let's run another clip from President Zelensky's speech.
The Ukrainian justice will do its part. according to the Ukrainian jurisdiction. I do believe that International Criminal Court will inevitably bring justice in the crimes that are under your jurisdiction. The military crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide.
Yeah, another powerful clip. Any reflections on that, Anna?
Well, I think it's very powerful that President Zelensky already speaks about the strong judicial system that has to deal with as I said before, Ukraine has to be in the driving seat of its own accountability efforts, and we can only provide support, all the support that they need. But this primarily has to come from a strong judicial system that is independent, that is professional, and that abides the rule of law. And I was very pleased to listen to President Zelensky in a few occasions already refer to that, to the rule of law, to the respect for the rule of law, for international law. And that is something that they will find all the support from the European Union, from the Commission to strengthen their judicial system, because that will bring accountability and.
Yeah, I think even in his opening statement, Commissioner Reynders talked about the need for judicial reform in Ukraine. Can you give specific examples of what you're thinking of? And you mentioned in broad lines rule of law, but.
Well, the European Union granted very recently candidate status to Ukraine together with Moldova. So that means that both countries and Georgia as well will have to go through reforms in order to meet the requirements in terms of rule of law and in general, but concretely on rule of law, independence of the judiciary, strong institutions to provide for strong response from the institutions is very much needed. So
because
we will
right
support.
Now it's not robust enough, the Ukrainian judicial system.
Well, they have to undergo reforms to strengthen their institutional system and their judicial system. And of course, this is an effort in which they will find all the support from us in terms of funding, in terms of training, of institutional reinforcement. And that is not only necessary for the accession to the EU, but also will help reconstruction and will help accountability of war crimes.
Yeah. Okay. We've got one more clip to share.
I would like you to commemorate these people with a minute of silence. All those people who were killed since 2014 until today, all those who were murdered by Russia on our Ukrainian soil and in our Ukrainian sky.
Я дуже вам дякую.
Thank you.
Я вдячний вам всім за.
Yeah, I mean, the president has never been, shy or held back from showing his emotions. A powerful example there. On a personal level, Anita, what does it do to you to hear stories like that and to see, even putting this conference together? How do you feel?
Tired, but no, you're right. This is very impactful. Understandably for him, but for us, I think that goes for all three organizations. For us, the urgency was very obvious, and we worked very hard to set up the organization of this conference, and we're very happy with the result, and we're very proud of it.
Yeah. And I mentioned it this morning, but it's a very immersive kind of approach to organizing a conference like this. I mean, the main room and that big round table is intimidating, and the images and the sounds of the videos and stuff. Are you now kind of immune to all of that because you've seen it so much, or does it really?
No, it's on the contrary, really. to me, it still has a big impact. All those images. So you were talking about earlier that if you visit the country, it comes in even more. Mm-hmm. But to me, even those pictures and film material it gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, sure.
And the reason also why we did this is, and I think that has worked out well in the conference itself, is because the content is very important in this conference. It's not a conference where people just talk and then they leave and they have their coffee. We wanted to make sure during the conference also that people see what it's about. And I think that has happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it normal for conferences on topics like this to be so expansively organized with photos and the entrance hall and is that something you have experienced before in your roles?
I think certainly, I've seen efforts like this before. I must say that this conference, and credit to the Netherlands, has been quite powerful and really well done in terms of kind of setting the stage and setting the mood for the topic that we're discussing. So in that regard, I think it's been quite powerful. And I think the clip you just showed is the point I took from that was, let's not lose sight of the victims, that moment of silence. This is what it's all about. And the setup you mentioned when you walk into the conference and you see the pictures, it's really, again, it puts you back, what are we doing this for? Yes, the principle of accountability is so important, but it's really for the victims. Yeah. And it's to allow these individuals, these families, society to move on through accountability. So I think the conference has done really excellent job in that regard.
Yeah, okay. Listen, before we wrap up, I'd love to hear from each of you what the first next step is that you're each going to take. I mean, your inboxes must be full. There are lots of meetings you need to have, but what are you each going to prioritize? Each of your organizations have their own priorities of their own, but what do you each need to prioritize in the context of this whole, the goals of the conference?
Well, from the Office of the Prosecutor, I mean, our priority, remains and will be, to continue to conduct our investigations. Yeah. That won't change. But I think one of the, takeaways is this renewed effort at coordination and kind of the burden sharing that we have to do together on this. And I think coordination, in principle, is an excellent idea, but it takes, a bit of a concerted effort to actually implement it. So I think, the next step for us is to see, okay, what structure are we going to put in place to ensure that this wasn't, a wonderful one-day conference with lots of good things said, but what's the next tangible step? So it's immediately for me, it's to figure out, what is that next meeting from here that we take, the commitments that were made here and start putting that into action.
Does that mean that the coordination aspect is the most challenging for the ICC?
Well, I wouldn't say it's the most challenging, but certainly...
What is then? What's the most challenging aspect?
Well, I think the most challenging aspect for us right now is the investigations, and it's investigating in a country that's still in an active war zone, and all the security and access issues that come with that. Yeah. But one way you can tackle that is through enhanced coordination and leveraging what different institutions and entities can provide. And I think there's a lot of goodwill there, but we have to actually make it happen and make it operational, make this coordination operational. I think that's the most key step for at least from my perspective.
Anna?
Well, for me, in the short term, tomorrow I will have the 12th meeting of the task force Freeze and Seize that we put together with member states and Eurojust, Europol and Commission services to help coordinate the enforcement of sanctions, of economic sanctions to Russia in the context of the war. So today's conference is not just one of a kind. It continues. This is a very good moment to stop and think of our what we have done and what we have to do, and it sends a really strong message of unity of the international community and strengthens the international order based in rules. But our daily work is constantly turning around this war and around the support to Ukraine. So yes, tomorrow I will have this task force meeting again for the 12th time since the war started, which will be chaired by Commissioner Reynders, and we will take it from there and continue our efforts.
Okay. Anita?
Well, for us, of course, the follow-up of this meeting is also very important. So I assume that we will be very busy looking at follow-up steps. And also, like Anna was saying, our normal work continues as well, also in the field of accountability, for Ukraine. There are a number of initiatives that will be started, for instance, in the field of giving more support to victims of sexual violence. So that's what we'll be working on.
Can you give a couple of examples of those initiatives?
Well, this is an additional amount that we pledged for victims, and we need to work out how to spend it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Clear. Okay, thank you very much to all of you for joining me here. Thank you at home for watching the channel rather, and taking away all the messages, hopefully inspiring messages from the Ukraine Accountability Conference. It's clear that there is a lot of work to do. The minister said it himself. But we knew it wasn't going to be easy, it just has to be worth it, as they say. So from me here at the studio in The Hague, Ikenna Azuike, wish you all a great rest of the day and stay safe wherever you are in the world. Goodbye.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today at the Ukraine Accountability Conference. My name is Jacqueline Nies with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's a pleasure to introduce to you our honourable hosts. From left to right on stage, Mr. Reynders, EU Commissioner for Justice, Mr. Hoekstra, Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Netherlands, and Mr. Gaan, ICC Prosecutor, and of course our honourable guest, Mrs. Venediktova, General Prosecutor for Ukraine. We will start this press conference with brief statements. Then I'll open up the room for questions. Please ask them in English. And one of our runners will come to you with a microphone. And now I would like to invite Mr. Hoekstra for the first statement.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. During today's conference, we saw reports of a Russian missile strike that killed at least 12 people. And one of them was a child. And I am sure that I speak for everyone who is here today when I say that news like this convinces us even more of the necessity and the urgency of justice. More than 20,000 war crimes and crimes of aggression have been reported in Ukraine. And the sad conclusion is that it doesn't stop there. Last year, there were more than 6,000 ongoing international core crimes investigations in the EU alone. Impunity is a massive problem in Ukraine, in Europe, and in the rest of the world. And this problem requires a unified response, ensuring that for Ukraine, all roads eventually lead to justice. And that when atrocities occur in the future, all roads lead to justice there too. Today's conference was an important step towards that strategy. And I'm truly impressed by the contributions of participating countries. More than 20 million to strengthen accountability and justice. And many participants have announced to support the ICC and Ukraine Prosecutor's Office by sending experts for evidence gathering and for other activities. But perhaps I am most impressed by the fact that we're really doing this together. Today was truly teamwork. The road to justice requires more money, more action, more dialogue, and more coordination. The Netherlands is donating an additional 1 million euros to the ICC. We've also pledged an additional 1 million euros to support the UN Human Rights Field Office in Ukraine. And we are pledging 1 million for psychosocial support for victims of sexual violence. We're stepping up our cooperation with the ICC and with the Ukrainian Prosecutor-General. And we're also sharing specialized psychosocial expertise with relevant partners. To support Ukraine further, the Netherlands has also stepped forward to intervene at the interstate case that Ukraine has raised against Russia at the European Court of Human Rights. Ladies and gentlemen, our most important win today is that this conference is just the beginning. We are setting up a collaboration initiative allowing us to fight impunity better, together, also in the future. Because our joint voices must not be a one-off exercise. Our combined efforts must and will not stop here today. We need to translate our shared and strong conviction for justice into a unified answer against impunity, and use the results of this conference as a blueprint to respond to cruelties and crimes committed in Ukraine and in the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Mr. Gaan?
Well, thank you so much for being here. This is really a very important day. I personally, and on behalf of the Office of the Prosecutor, I'm really indebted to the leadership shown by the Foreign Minister of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and the Commissioner for Justice of the European Union, and really proud and humbled to be sitting next to the great Prosecutor-General Ikenna Azuike of Ukraine. Words are cheap, too much has been promised for too long. And I think today, from many vantage points, represents a realization that we as lawyers and investigators need to take the law off the page and put it into action. Politicians and diplomats and others realize that promises cannot evaporate on the lips the moment that they are uttered. And the realization that to do that requires hard work, it requires stamina. And our business is evidence, not politics. Our obligation is to investigate incriminating and exculpatory evidence equally, subject it to forensic standards, and then to submit it to independent and impartial judges in due course. Only then can the rule of law be rendered stronger and more effective. So in this moment of desolation, and of course you would have seen the photographs in the foyer as you come in and see the sunlight, the photographs of Ukraine in the sun, and then you go through the corridor of darkness with the desolation, we need to find a way to make sure the law works more effectively. I think already we knew the 43 states, 1/3 of all the state parties to the Rome Statute had referred the Ukraine situation to the court. There will be a declaration in due course that 45 states have signed up to, which is a promise to show the stamina moving forward. But if we're to resist the failings of the past, to have this stampede that is sometimes seen of different actors running to crime scenes, we need to be coordinated. We need to have dialogue. We need to have communication. And the dialogue group that is going to be established in due course is an important means, respecting the independence of different mandate holders, to work together. And today, the fact that in addition to the high-level foreign ministers and, of course, the Prosecutor-General, but the fact that the High Commissioner of Human Rights attended, gave a video statement, and the members of the United Nations, special representatives for children in armed conflict or sexual violence in conflict or for prevention of genocide, it's important that we speak with one voice and we can divide the work effectively to avoid duplication, but to ensure that justice is delivered. Now, this is going to require a lot of action. We're going to launch in a very short period of time, along with Eurojust and the Genocide Network and the Office of the Prosecutor, guidelines for civil society to make sure that do's and don'ts are made clear so that their capacity can be fully harnessed in a way that makes sure that evidence collected can meet international standards. The same will be done in relation to national authorities. The guidelines, again, in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that will be published. Now, it's important, as we use technology as well to move forward, that we use this as a moment of coming together, a wake-up call that injustice is a threat to democracy, it's a threat to the rule of law, and this has to go beyond Ukraine, because every life matters. No people of the world are more precious than other people of the world. And we need to use this moment to be a new awakening that the rule of law means more than human rights. It means more than normative principles, critically important those principles are. It's required for peace, to avoid the hellish scenes that you would have seen that unfortunately are suffered by the people of Ukraine, but also in other parts of the world. So I think it's an important event. It's not a talk shop. It's an action shop, and if we deliver on the commitments collectively, hopefully the promise of justice can be more than pious hopes and wishful prayers. They can be delivered before independent and impartial courts, whether in Ukraine, whether they're in the ICC, or whether they're in the courts of national authorities. Justice is too precious to sacrifice and look away from. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mr. Reynders?
No, thank you. Good afternoon. I want to say that yesterday we have published our rule of law report about the 27 member states, but today it's also a very important day for the rule of law and for justice. And I want to thank the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands for the organization of such a conference. Wopke, it was a very important day to show the unity of many countries in the world, but also many organizations to support Ukraine. And it was very important to organize such a dialogue with such a conference to prove that. Of course, it's an important day to organize the unity of all the countries and organizations trying to take part in the process. And I'm sure that we have a lot of things to do to continue to work together. But certainly the main issue today is to organize a good coordination of not only our words, but also our actions. And first of all, to support the Prosecutor-General of Ukraine, of course, Irina Venediktova, because she's at work on the ground in an unsafe situation in Ukraine, and we are very proud to see such a capacity to collect so many evidence to try to organize prosecutions and then trials about the atrocities committed in Ukraine. And we try also to give the same support for the ICC and for Karim, the prosecutor. And I was very proud to see today that there were so many new pledges from member states, from organizations to send more experts, to send some money to. And it will be important to have a roadmap to continue to do that, not only for some weeks, for some months, maybe more than that, because it will be a long process. That's the first element, and we try to organize a good coordination of all the supports provided to the Ukrainian Prosecutor-General, but also the ICC. Second element, we will continue, of course, to push pressure on Russia, and we'll continue to have a correct implementation of all the sanctions. Tomorrow, I will share again a task force freeze and seize to see how it's possible to go further in the way to freeze assets of oligarchs and entities. Till now, we have frozen 13.8 billion euros in the European Union member states, and we want to continue and to see how it's possible with judicial procedure to seize some assets. And the goal is to put the money coming from the confiscations in a common fund to give the money back to Ukraine and to the Ukrainians. And then, of course, about the war crimes and accountability, it's also very important to see that we are trying to use all the existing tools that we have and to reinforce those tools. Of course, the national jurisdictions, first of all in Ukraine, but also in 14 member states of the European Union, because we have started in those member states investigations about war crimes due to the universal jurisdiction in those member states. We have also, of course, the possibility to work with the ICC, and we'll continue to do that because the ICC is also on the ground. It's the same with the European Court of Human Rights, because there are so many violations of human rights in Ukraine. I'm just thinking about the property rights of many Ukrainians, and they have lost their houses, they have lost quite everything in Ukraine, and it's very important to take into account that in the different procedure at the national level, before the ICC, but also before the European Court of Human Rights. And of course, in the EU, we try to provide all the possible tools to help the prosecutors to organize investigations, prosecutions, and then to go to trials. And to do that, we are using first Eurojust. And Eurojust, we have now a joint investigation team with Ukraine and 5 member states of the European Union, Poland, Slovakia, and the 3 Baltic states, with, for the first time, the participation of the ICC and a good collaboration with our colleagues from the US. And if it's possible, I will be very pleased to see other member states having started investigation at the national level, taking part in the joint investigation team. You know that we have also amended the regulation dedicated to Eurojust to give the possibility to Eurojust to store all the evidence collected in Ukraine and in the testimonies of refugees in all member states, and then to exchange those evidence with all the prosecutors and all the possible actors. And of course, to do that, we need to act in a full respect for the rule of law. So we have kind to provide guidance to all the actors to organize the way to collect evidence in a full respect for the rule of law and the fundamental rights. And of course, the ICC at the international level will be maybe the most important actor, and we urge all the participants today, but certainly also Ukraine, to ratify the Rome Statute. It's very important to show that there's a clear commitment to take part in the Rome Statute and to organize all the investigations in Ukraine in full respect for the competence of the ICC. But again, I'm very proud that it was possible to show such a unity today and to make progress in the dialogue, to have a good coordination, because it's the main issue that we have, not only, I said, for the next months and years, maybe for more than that, maybe for decades. You know that we are still now, till now, starting some investigations and prosecutions about the genocide in Rwanda or in Srebrenica. And so it's very important to think that we are not just working for the people in office now, for the successor, but maybe also for the next generation. It will be a long journey, but it was an important day today to start such a journey.
Mrs. Venito.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, dear friends. You know, we have the city in the center of Ukraine. It is Vinnytsia. It is again the center of Ukraine. Today, 20 people killed by Russian missiles, including 3 children. 52 injured by Russian missile, including children. And this information we have every day from morning till night to morning. We see more and more facts of war crimes. It's more now than 23,000 of such cases only about war crimes, when Ukrainians are killed, tortured, raped, and so on and so on. That's why these meetings, this huge honorable conference was very important to take this war in focus. I understand that we have huge number of wars, unfortunately, on our planet. And this war is not the first and unfortunately not the last. But again, we should do our lessons and we should have some results because we are free, civilized people. I appreciate very much personally His Excellency Mr. Hoekstra for organizing this conference in the place of peace and justice. I appreciate very much His Excellency Mr. Reynders, who is with us from first days of this very aggressive war when in full-scale invasion started. I appreciate very much prosecutor of ICC Karim, who started his own investigations as soon as possible and came in Ukraine 3 times. I understand people of your countries. I understand people who take our refugees, who see how prices will rise up from month to month. But dear friends, today's 5th month, when we have this situation in the center of Europe, we mentioned today several times that impunity is not an option, that instruments of international law, instruments of international humanitarian law should protect people, should prevent such aggression in the future. And we are very modern people. We understand the value of human lives. We understand that we are responsible before our future generation. I am Prosecutor-General of Ukraine. Every day we have extra 200, 300 cases only about war crimes. I think that actually we should do our steps very fast, because it's true, impunity is not the option. People who are responsible for such aggressive war, we should to take specific words for this. This is war, very aggressive, very brutal war. People who are responsible for this should be punished. And this is first step. And we understand that if we decided don't think about it, how we don't think, for example, about it in Georgia, in Chechnya, in Syria, in 2014 in Donetsk and Lugansk and Crimea, now we see that it will be just worse and worse. And we all are very strong because we are united. And I think this is the most big value what we have now, that we have here all these men and all others men who were on this conference and who are besides them in their states, who are ready to stop such precedents on our planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have now time for a few questions. First question, I'd like to add to 1+1 TV, Ukraine. There's a mic.
So my question is about introduction the special ad hoc tribunal for Ukraine, which Ukraine is asking for. Are there any negotiations? What are the results? Will it be introduced? What its jurisdictions will be, and who will pay for it? Actually, thank you.
The question is to me, ma'am. Okay. No, I think it's a very valid point. It was mentioned today by Minister Kuleba and by President Zelensky as well. And the reason is that aggression, which in a way is actually an understatement, it is the illegal war that the Russians started, is the crime of crimes, the mother of all crimes in this particular situation. Because if the invasion would not have happened, we would not be talking about investigating all the atrocities that we have been discussing and that we're investigating. So I do think there is merit into looking into this, also because the way I understand it, and I'm with all the legal expertise on my left and right hand side, I'm a bit cautious in my description, but the way I understand it, we have to fill the vacuum, and the ICC here doesn't have the jurisdiction. So I can imagine that we do look into coming up with such a tribunal. As the Netherlands, we will take an open look into this. It will probably not be easy. There is merit in doing that with as many friends as possible from the international community, but we will seek to support Ukraine where we can.
Thank you. Next question. Gentleman over there.
Yes, I have a question. Michel Keres, NRC, but I have a question for Mr. Khan. Where do you see the ICC going in this respect? What do you would be future tasks you think the ICC could take on? And for Minister Hoekstra, I have a question. You wanted to have a coordination of all the national and international initiatives in this field. How would that look like? What does the conference came up with in the end?
Well, the future task is to get to the truth. I mean, that's what justice is about, isn't it? We have an obligation under Article 54 of the Rome Statute to investigate incriminating and exculpatory evidence equally. We have to do that in a very sober and responsible way, realizing that we're living in a world of truth and also falsehood, of accurate news and fake news, and we can't be gullible. And we use the expertise that we have, those that are also secondments that are joining us, technology to authenticate information, and to see what crimes may have been committed and who's responsible. The second aspect is redefining success. I have talked about that even before I was elected, well before the Ukraine conflict started. It's not only about the ICC. The kind of crimes within our jurisdiction are normally so wide, so heavy, that no one court alone can cope. Ukraine, of course, under the principle of complementarity, has the primary obligation in international law and the primary right to try to prosecute. But we have a very good relationship with the Prosecutor-General of Ukraine, and we're trying to work in a way that's intelligent, looking at the types of skills that we have and where cases can be most properly brought. And the other aspect is using technology. We need to realize that the massive data sets that are produced by telephones that you have in your pockets and that people have around the world require technology, but we need to use it. We need to be able to grapple with those data sets, not only to present cases to the judges of the ICC, but in a way that we should also be able to provide that to other state parties, because the fora is not important. It doesn't matter if it's the flag of the Netherlands or the flag of the ICC or Germany or France. The point is, the evidence that one has received, as long as there's an informed consent, should be used as effectively as possible to narrow the impunity gaps that are, around the world, actually. And we need to start here with Ukraine and do better in all our situations, because ultimately, if we have a two-standard approach, it's going to undermine confidence in the rule of law. Notwithstanding double standards that exist in the world, we need to move to a world in which the law means something and everybody needs to adhere to a greater extent to the law than maybe has been the case in the past.
Thank you.
The question of Mr. Keres to me was about coordination, and he's very right. There were multiple objectives for this conference, of course, all under the header of doing justice. The conference is about action, it is about awareness, it is about perseverance, but it is also about coordination. And also from that respect, to me, the conference truly was a success. And that has to do with the specifics that countries pledge, but also the build-up towards the conference, because then actually you can match the supply of you can make sure that the supply of countries and the demand of the ICC are being brought in sync. And you see that countries specifically pledge money, they specifically pledge resources for the ICC. Various countries made various offerings, and a range of countries also pledged to send a team similar to the teams of France and the Netherlands that have been going there before. So I think we made a huge step in coordination, but let's also be realistic. Coordination will continue to be needed because this will be a longer-term effort.
Thank you. Reuters? Anthony? Yep. Is that Mike?
Hi there, Anthony Deutsch, Reuters. First question for the Minister Hoekstra. If you were to say what today's kind of biggest achievement was, I mean, you said there's going to be a political statement from 45 countries. But what out of today do you think will, in practical terms, will help Ukraine in this huge task of prosecuting war crimes? And I have a second question, if I may, for Prosecutor-General Venediktova. You've launched 2 trials so far of war crimes in domestic courts. Are you expecting any more trials soon? And if so, which type of crimes do you expect will be in those trials? Thank you.
You know, it's always difficult to single out one thing. I just mentioned to Mr. Karras had a combination of awareness, action, perseverance, and coordination, of course, all under the header of justice. But maybe the most important thing of a day like today, with all the stories and also the personal accounts, and hearing what is happening in terms of completely innocent civilians who are being butchered with their hands tied behind their back. Women and men being raped, and sometimes family members being forced to look at that. Torture, and that at a massive scale. Discussing that, and you know, intellectually everyone understands how awful that is, but hearing that and making that sink in and feeling that, I think that fuels the perseverance of the international community, and so it should.
About your answer about our cases. Actually, we have now 6 judgments from first instance of the court, and it is about war crimes, killing civilian, then shelling civilian infrastructure, and now all these cases now in appeal instance. And we have 4 cases which are now in the trial of first instance. It is one case about killing the husband and raping their wife. This person is not physically in Ukraine. We prosecute him in absentia. Then it is about shelling civilian infrastructure. And we have 127 suspicions. It means that we started to prosecute these people. We identify them. It's absolutely different kind of war crimes. You know that under Ukrainian legislation we have only one article, war crime, but we use actually Rome Statute and look at this, and we understand that it's only a question of time when Ukraine will ratify Rome Statute. We respect and we want to use these very high standards of international humanitarian law. That's why we have these types of war crimes for us. And if we speak about these 127 people, they tortured, they raped, they killed civilians, they shelled to civilian infrastructure, they looted. Actually, we have huge number of cases and all 3 pages of Rome Statute which are connected to war crimes. Unfortunately, we had and have in Ukraine We have now, in these 127 suspicions, you see that we have 23,000 cases. It means that it's a huge part of the job which we should do. If we speak about crime of aggression, we have more than 70 cases about crime of aggression. And in our main anchor came, it is now 624 suspects, people whom we started to prosecute at the top level of militaries, politicians, top propaganda agents of Russian Federation, all of people who are responsible for starting this in full-scale invasion, except these people, Troika, such called Troika, which has functional immunity.
Thank you. Yeah. Lady in the back. Yeah, you with the green dress. Yes, there you are.
Hi, it's a question for the two prosecutors. Just to clarify on the issue of complementarity, will the ICC and Ukraine be able to work together to create a war crimes tribunal, even though Russia and Ukraine haven't signed up to the Rome Statute? And if Ukraine signs up soon, can the investigations be done retrospectively? Thank you.
Well, we're working together. If I might go first, if you don't mind. We're working very closely together in relation to the Rome Statute. And the Rome Statute is not to be sniffed at. After all, if one surveys the existing legal architecture after Nuremberg, the former Yugoslavia, Karadzic, Mladic, Milosevic, there was no crime of aggression, and yet there was justice. If one looks at Rwanda and John Kabanda, the former prime minister, there was no crime of aggression, of course, an internal armed conflict. But in relation to Liberia and Charles Taylor, again, it was crimes against humanity and war crimes. So we have more than enough to get our teeth into, more than enough that makes a difference to the victims, more than enough that underlines the importance of human life, the rights of children not to be deliberately targeted and terribly affected by conflicts. You know, of course, the rights of men and women not to be subjected to sexual and gender-based violence. I much rather focus on what we've got rather than lamenting what we don't have. I don't think we can, at this moment of this critical juncture, be so self-indulgent. And I think where I'm really positive is working with the Prosecutor-General of Ukraine and her team, trying to deal with some very difficult issues, but in a way with underpinned by a belief that where there's a will, there's a way. And I think we're moving very positively, and I hope that we are going to accelerate in a way that can demonstrate to the victims and the survivors, whether they're refugees in Poland or displaced throughout Europe, or whether they're in subways in Ukraine, that the law is not impotent. The law can do more than crawl. It is not necessarily so pedestrian. That's the challenge we've got, and we have to deliver on it.
As for me, I want to answer that we started to cooperate before in full-scale invasion. It was in previous year, and we started to build this infrastructure, how to implement all instruments which need ICC to work on the ground in Ukraine. Because for ICC, it's very important to be objective and do their job independent. We understand it and we respect it. From other side, I want to say that Prosecutor Khan started his own investigation in the first days of March. Then, firstly, in the history of ICC, Office of Prosecutor, ICC joint investigation team. That's why, for me, as a prosecutor of Ukraine, I see not only for process. Process for us is very important because it should be correct. And in Ukraine, in international platform, and in all 18 states which started their own proceedings and their own investigations. But for me, it's very important, more important, results. These results should be when our victims are still alive, actually. Now I speak about I want to make two stresses. Again, nobody knows what will be tomorrow. I gave you example Vinnytsia, the city in the center of Ukraine. Nobody knows where this missile will be tomorrow or after tomorrow. We saw it in Odessa, in Kremenchuk. It could be shopping mall, it could be hospital, it could be kindergarten, it could be everything. And from other side, this justice should be not in 20 years, not in 30 years. We have such examples. justice is delayed, is justice is denied, actually. It's possible. That's why for us, for Ukrainian side, it's very important to do this job with international community, because support and assistance of international community is very, very valuable in all levels, in politician level, in military level, in economical level, in judicial level, in all levels. It's very valuable for us. But from other side, we understand that we should do this step by step together to the common goal. Common goal, it is accountability and justice.
Telegraaf. Peter? Ja.
Peter Winterman, de Telegraaf. For Mr. Hoekstra, like many other countries, the Netherlands supplies weapons to Ukraine. Is it possible to ascertain whether those weapons fall in Russian hands and whether they are used in war crimes?
We have no indication of that. And as you know, after the conversations we've also had with many of the nations that support weapons with the Secretary-General of NATO, we are a bit cautious in describing what we exactly deliver and when we deliver it. Even though you are aware, and the Dutch public is aware, of a number of things that we have done in the past, such as the Panzerhaubitsers recently with Germany and a couple of other things. So in theory, you know, these things are always possible, but I have no indication that that is happening. And I think both we, our allies, and the Ukrainian forces are very careful to make sure that this doesn't happen.
I think we have room for one more question. Ampe, the lady next to you.
Thank you very much for taking my question. Erika Kienitz from the Associated Press. Question for Commissioner Didier Reynders. You had mentioned there's 13.8 billion euros in Russian money that's been seized by European member states. Is there currently any mechanism for confiscating that money to create a compensation fund for Ukraine? If not, what needs to happen in order to make that possible?
So first of all, for the moment, we have organized a way to freeze money. So it's an administrative process by the treasuries in all the member states, and this is why I said it's for a total amount of 13.8 billion euros. But that's the way to freeze. So the property is still in the hands of the oligarchs and the entities. It's just an administrative process. But it's also possible to go further and to organize with a judicial process a way to seize the same kind of assets if there is a link with a criminal offense, corruption, money laundering. And you know that we have asked to the Council and the Parliament in the European Union to extend the list of Eurocrimes to make a Eurocrime of the fact that there is an attempt to circumvent the sanctions, to bypass the sanctions. And of course, with that, it will be easier maybe to seize and to organize a confiscation. We have received the support of the Parliament. It was approved by the Parliament. It will be the same by the Council maybe just after the summer. And we will come from the Commission with the secondary steps, so the secondary law, the directive in October to go very fast. It's already possible in some member states. So the first phase is to freeze with an administrative process, and then it's possible in justice, of course, to obtain a condemnation and to seize the assets. If it's the case, we have asked all the member states to put the money coming from the confiscation in a common fund to help Ukraine, so to give the money back to the Ukrainian people. Of course, there are different other kinds of requests that we have listened today from the Ukrainian side to see is it possible to do more and to try to seize assets from the Central Bank of Russia, to give a very concrete example. Of course, we are very prudent on this because we want to have a link with a criminal offense, but of course, we have decided to freeze assets also for the central bank. So it's possible to do that for a long period of time. The idea is to ask, of course, to Russia to take part in the reconstruction. If it's not, it's possible to continue to freeze the assets of the Central Bank of Russia, and that is for more money than the assets of the oligarchs. We are speaking maybe of 200-300 billions in the US and in Europe.
With that, we're closing this press conference. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks. Have a safe trip home.
So, absolutely. It was very good.
Oh, thanks again. Thank you.